The morning air was still crisp, carrying the scent of pine and dew-soaked earth. A few soft rays of sunlight cut through the trees, lighting up the clearing around my cabin like a secret stage. I had just poured myself a cup of strong black coffee and settled into the creaky old chair on the porch when I heard it, the sound of tires crunching gravel. Not many vehicles made it this far up the valley. Most people didn't even know the road existed. Curious, I stood and walked to the edge of the porch. Sure enough, a small silver SUV was pulling up, kicking up dust as it rolled to a stop about 20 feet from my cabin. The engine cut off, and the door flung open with a dramatic swing. Out stepped a woman in her mid-50s, hair sprayed into a helmet-like shape, sunglasses perched on her head, even though the sun was barely out. She was dressed head to toe in an immaculate pastel tracksuit and carried a clipboard like it was an extension of her hand. I didn't need her to introduce herself to know what I was dealing with. She made a beeline toward me, a mixture of determination and disapproval painted across her face. I took a slow sip of my coffee and waited. No use in rushing whatever this was. "Good morning," she said, flashing a tight smile that didn't quite touch her eyes. "I'm Karen, president of the Whispering Pines Homeowners Association." I raised an eyebrow. "Morning. You must be the new tenant?" she asked, giving the word a subtle bite, as though she already knew the answer and didn't like it. "No," I said, keeping my tone even. "I'm the owner." That one word stopped her in her tracks for a moment. Her eyes narrowed behind her oversized glasses, then dropped to the clipboard where she flipped a few pages. She clearly hadn't expected that answer. "Well, we weren't notified of any property changes up here," she said briskly. "This cabin isn't on the HOA records. There are strict guidelines for construction, appearance, and land use. No one applied for any variances, and I see no approved permits on file. This structure, as it stands, violates at least 6 community standards, not including your mailbox." She gestured toward the rustic wooden box nailed to a tree, which is a complete eyesore. I stared at her for a moment, letting her words hang in the air like the morning fog she'd just walked through. Then I stepped off the porch and onto the dirt path that ran around the edge of the clearing. I motioned toward the far ridge where the forest thickened and the sun painted the hills in gold. "You see that ridge?" I asked. "I own that, and everything between here and the river bend on the other side." Karen squinted in disbelief, clearly not used to being challenged. "That's impossible. This entire valley is under Whispering Pines jurisdiction." I smiled. "Karen, I am Whispering Pines. Or at least, I own the land it pretends to govern." She blinked hard. Her mouth opened and closed once, then again, as if words were forming but couldn't quite escape. "I purchased this land 10 years ago from the county," I continued, calm as ever. "It was never part of your development. There's no HOA jurisdiction here. The county confirmed it in writing. You're about half a mile outside your legal boundary." Karen's face reddened with frustration. She clutched her clipboard tighter, as though squeezing it might somehow make this situation bend to her will. "I'll be speaking with the county," she said stiffly. "You do that," I said, already turning back toward the porch. "In the meantime, please stay on the public road. Everything else here? It's private property." She stood there, for a moment longer, stewing, before storming back to her SUV and slamming the door. I sat back down in my chair, took another sip of coffee, and enjoyed the quiet. The next morning, the quiet of the valley was broken again. This time, by the unmistakable hum of engines approaching in tandem. I looked up from the stack of firewood. I was chopping and saw 2 sheriff's department SUVs rolling up the gravel path. Karen's silver vehicle was already parked by the trailhead, practically vibrating with righteous indignation. She stood beside it, arms folded across her chest, the same clipboard in hand like it was some kind of legal sword. I sighed, set the axe aside, and wiped my hands on a towel slung over my shoulder. It didn't take a genius to figure out what was happening. As the deputies stepped out of their vehicles, Karen practically ran to meet them, heels clicking against the gravel. "Officers, thank you so much for coming," she said, her voice dripping with exaggerated relief. "This is the structure I told you about. It's completely unapproved. No permits. No oversight. The man living here, he's refused to cooperate with our community regulations and could pose a danger to the integrity of the neighborhood." The younger of the two deputies raised an eyebrow. "Danger, ma'am?" "Well, not violent danger," she clarified quickly, lowering her voice just enough to sound serious. "But structural, regulatory. Our property values are at stake." The older deputy, a man who looked like he'd been doing this job for 20 years too long, scratched his chin and glanced up the road toward me. I stood still, arms folded, waiting patiently for the circus to reach my porch. "Let's go." "Talk to him," he said. Karen followed close behind them as they walked up the path, her shoes crunching the gravel with indignation. I could practically hear her composing her next HOA newsletter in her head. "Morning, officers," I said, giving them a polite nod. "What can I do for you?" "Morning," the older deputy replied, giving me a quick once-over. "We got a call about a possible illegal structure, some kind of dispute with a homeowners association. Just here to see what's going on." Karen stepped forward before I could answer. "He doesn't belong here. This property isn't on the HOA records. No application was filed, no permits displayed. And frankly, his landscaping violates at least 3 neighborhood codes." The younger deputy looked confused. "Ma'am, what's the address here?" Karen rattled off the number and name of a street that didn't actually exist up here. I reached inside the cabin door and pulled out a rolled-up county land use map, along with a copy of my property deed. I handed them both to the older deputy. "This is my land," I said. "All 180 acres of it. I bought it outright from the county a decade ago. This spot? It's outside the Whispering Pines HOA by nearly half a mile. This cabin is fully permitted under county regulations. Not only is her HOA not in charge here, it never was." The older deputy studied the documents for a moment and nodded slowly. "He's right," he said to his partner. "This parcel is outside the HOA's jurisdiction." Karen's face paled, then flushed crimson. "That can't be right. I've lived here 12 years. Everything in this valley has always been part of Whispering Pines." I turned and pointed at the map. "Not quite. Your development ends at Ridge Line Road. My property begins just beyond that. You've got no authority here, not legally and not practically." The younger deputy handed the documents back with a small smile. "Seems like a misunderstanding, ma'am. Nothing illegal here." Karen opened her mouth, shut it again, and stood stiffly, her whole body radiating silent fury. She stormed off, without another word, heels stabbing the gravel like she was trying to hurt the earth itself. The deputies tipped their hats and returned to their vehicles. As they drove off, I picked up my axe again and chuckled to myself. Nothing like a little map to shut down a paper queen.